At this time, I'd like to bring Aimee Allison and our closing panel back for some closing words of wisdom. Come on. Yeah, come on.
Yay!
I want you to know that as we continue this event, Aimee Allison has already signed up for July 13 at 10 o'clock in the morning Pacific time. We will get all this information out to you, but if you want to continue your discussion with Aimee, July 13 at 10 in the morning. Aimee, take it away.
We made it! Another Craigslist boot camp. That's awesome. Give yourselves a round of applause for making it all the way to now. All right, just raise your hand if you met 3 cool people you're going to stay in touch with. Yeah, me too. And I had wonderful conversations in the hallway, actually extended ones where it's like, you know, I was thinking about this, or I'm doing this thing, and it's risky, or I'm struggling with this issue. And to be able to have those exchanges is so valuable, which is why we're here today. At the conclusion of our day, after you had your informal conversations, you had the action labs, you had your workshops, now's the time to bring it all together and create a plan for yourself, your career, what you're going to leave the boot camp just ready to do. And so we have a wonderful panel here today to share not only their learning, what they've gotten out of the day, but to have a conversation with each other about where we can go from here. And I want to introduce the customer service rep for Craigslist, Craig Newmark. Give him a round of applause. Founder of Craigslist. That was his joke, not mine. The next panelist, Lucy Bernholz, is a publisher of Philanthropy 2173, an award-winning blog on the business of giving, and a Hand Foundation Fellow in Philanthropy at the New American Foundation. Welcome her to the stage. And then we have Chris Gates, who's the first executive director of the Philanthropy for Active Civic Engagement, known as PACE, a new organization bringing attention and focus to the issues of civic engagement. Welcome, Chris. And Ed Everett rounds out our panel. He's a nationally known expert in the area of community building and civic engagement, was city manager for many years in Redwood City, and now has a new company where he's developing technology to bring communities together. And we're glad to have you with us, Ed. All right, I thought I would start with a very basic question. As I ask the panel, and I'm going to begin with you, Chris, what's the one thing that you're taking away from this year's boot camp?
I guess the one thing that I would take away is that that there's an amazing amount of pain and hope out there. And I heard a lot of stories about the work that people were doing, and it was a real reminder that at the ground level, at the grassroots level, that there's a lot of pain out there, that this, you know, that the bad economy and that the struggle that a lot of people are in our communities, to hear a story about, you know, folks that are elderly that have to heat their apartment by, you know, running their oven and their stove is sort of shocking. And so it was a reminder that there's a lot of pain out there, that there's a lot of work that we need to do. But I was also struck by the amount of hope, and that everybody here nobody was beaten down by any of it. And everybody was inquisitive and curious and open and hopeful, and I was just impressed that all of you seemed like you were sort of in problem-solving mode, that you were, you know, the challenges were huge, but you were here because you were looking for new tools and trying to figure out how to get things done and how to make things better. So that's
you left with some hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Lucy.
I'm going to build off of Chris's use of the phrase problem solvers. I met, 45 problem solvers today from all different kinds of spaces, including technologists and community people. The thing that really struck me, though, was that this conference about community building is a practice of community building. And I took a moment at lunch to talk with someone about the intersection between the nonprofit space and the community organizers in the room, and the sharing economy, car sharers, neighbor good kind of people who just had a very interesting conference a few weeks ago at the Hub here in San Francisco. And it was really nice to see those two things coming together here.
Ed?
Yeah, it reminded me of something I started some 9 years ago, which was community building in Redwood City. What it came back to me, I guess, is in hearing this, it's sort of like that comment that Clinton made. It's all about community building, stupid. And that's what I have to sort of keep talking to myself about, that you can get diverted, but it really is about community. The other thing that really hit me that I kind of knew, but it sort of was pushed on, if people just do something they're passionate about, and they do it locally, they're building community. You will build community. If you do something you're passionate about and you do it locally, you'll build community. It's that easy, it's that simple. But the third thing is, we all know how to do community building. The issue is courage. And we need to talk about the courage piece.
Mm-hmm. And Craig, what's the one thing you came out of this day with?
One thing focused on pragmatics is the importance that I finally got from Lucy and Perlini earlier at our panel, is having a good story to tell. I mean, you may need a whole bunch of stories from your audience, your clients, even your donors, but you do need a good story about what you do, a good brief one in many cases, say when you're talking to someone who might have resources for you. You also have to realize, too, that there are maybe bad actors in your space who are good at nothing but telling a good story, because if they're focused only on that, they can get really good, and they can starve you of resources. So have a bunch of good stories around, including one good brief one about what you do, and get really good at it.
Do you think let's stay with you, Craig, because when you think about what advice you would offer to people who are operating in a space that may have some bad actors or struggling for resources.
Work with each other in whatever space you have, because you'll be stronger working with other people. And sometimes there aren't enough resources and stuff to go around because people realize there's a lot of need out there. The one I'm focused on right now is for military families and veterans, since they're always kind of screwed. And the idea is that work with each other, because a unified effort will get you farther than a very fragmented one. Can I get rid of this now?
Yeah, nice. Ed, since you're holding the mic,
Okay.
when you talk about a unified effort, and does that relate to the advice that you'd offer this room?
Yeah. What I heard a lot about, and I'll share a piece of advice that was given to me by Peter Block around the same subject. And a lot of people were asking questions, well, how this, how that, how this? And Peter came up to me, and he was pushing me because I was sort of doing a lot of research. And he said, Everett, you've been studying this thing for a couple of years. Why don't you get off your ass and do something? And I said, well, I'm not sure how. And he said, read my book. And I said, what book? And he said, read my book. The answer to how is yes. And I said, what a dumb title for a book, Peter. And I read his book, and it's a great book. And so my advice to you is quit asking how, especially of government. They're not going to tell you how. You know how. Just start doing it. The barrier is often courage, at least it was for me, so that would be my advice. And a great quote, our lives expand or contract in proportion to our courage.
Yeah. Lucy, your advice?
My advice, it just occurred to me the irony of this statement. My advice, what I learned today and what I'm going to do tonight or tomorrow morning is I'm actually going to make a list. Because I heard at least two stories today about people who made lists and it's actually changing the world. One was Craig, and I'm not talking about Craigslist. That's the pun that I just realized myself. I'm a little slow. No, it's Craig Connects. Craig talked about thinking that he actively supported 20 or 30 organizations. When he actually made a list, or had Susan make a list, turned out to be close to 100. I bet that's true for almost everybody in this room. And I think there's value in doing that. I've done it in the past, and I suddenly realized that actually my interest had changed in a way that my money was leading my interest, my time was leading my interest, and I hadn't even caught up to what I was doing, that I'd become very, very interested in a free press. That's where a lot of my time and energy and money was going, and I hadn't actually articulated that myself. So I'm going to go home and make a list of the organizations I support, the causes I care about, and see what it says about where I am in my life right now. The other list, just so you know, is the Perla Nee's great nonprofit. She recommends that you can actually make a favorites list. And I didn't know that. And I think that's actually an interesting way to make a list about what you care about and then make it very public and see what you learn from doing that.
Mm. What about lists? Is that part of your advice, Chris, or what would you?
Mine is probably a little bit less practical than that, and that is that my piece of advice would be for all of you to leave here being committed to being happy revolutionaries. And I'll say a quick word about both of those words. And I'll start with revolutionary. I'm absolutely convinced, and we talked about this this morning, that the times have changed enough, the earth has turned enough, the reality of what life looks like in American communities has changed enough that small solutions I don't think are really are particularly meaningful in our times, and that people need to think about big context-changing, shape-shifting changes that they want to make in their communities. I think it's time for people to think big thoughts, propose big solutions, to take some of those risks, and to think in slightly revolutionary ways, and to gently push back when people say, that's never going to happen here, we don't do it that way here, that's never going to work here. And so I think it's a time for revolutionary thought. And then the reason I put the adjective happy revolutionary in front of it is I think that in tough times it's easier for people to fall into despair, which can easily turn into anger. And I will tell you that in my 30 plus years of social change work, that I think the least effective political strategy, the least effective social change strategy in the world is anger. And I think that sometimes people who are really trying to get things done can fall into that trap. And the truth is that there's nothing more contagious than an optimistic person who says, yeah, I know things are tough, but you know what, we can figure this out. You know what, it's nobody's fault. I'm not going to point fingers, but let's all agree that we're going to do this different and move forward. And I think that there's an art, and I think that you see it in some community activists around the country who can really push big, radical, new ideas, but do it in a way that doesn't involve blame, that it doesn't involve pointing fingers, and it really sort of pulls people toward trying to really sort of get a community to collectively aspire to be better. And the truth is that we all have a better angel on one shoulder, and most of our politics in this country is about appealing to the worser angel, not the better angel. A lot of our politics is spent dragging people down and convincing people about why other folks are bad. But I think that everybody aspires to make a difference. Everybody aspires to be part of positive change, and we don't spend enough time appealing to that.
Mm. Allow me, I'd like to ask a follow-up, because part of the challenge when you're engaging in community building, and all of you mentioned some aspect of it, is dealing with conflict and convincing or trying to move a community to do something and encountering opposition. Your advice about that?
I think that as diverse as our country is, and as diverse as our communities are, that one of the things that absolutely unites us is that if you ask people on their own to pull out a pen and a piece of paper and write down the adjectives that they would like to use to describe their community in the future, that they all write down the same list of adjectives. We actually all know what a good community looks like. It's safe, it's got some parks, there's no litter, people don't honk horns, people hold doors for each other, there's not graffiti, kids can stay in that community if they want to because there's a job for them. That a good community is something that unites us, and sometimes I think it's really important to recognize that as diverse as we have become as communities, as far as the makeup of our communities, that we really define a good community in the same way. And there's so much, if you talk to successful community problem solvers around the country these days, the current phrase is shared value solutions, and that communities share a set of values. If you can figure out what the set of values are that people share, you can bring incredibly diverse sets of people together to move a community forward.
Ed, possible to tell stories based on those values? I mean, how critical is that?
I think stories are great. So I'm going to tell a quick story. we did a lot of work around community building in Redwood City. And we wanted to know, well, God, we've put out all this effort. Did it make a difference? So we had about 45 people who went through this effort. And, you know, people said nice things, and this one lady stood up in the back at the end, and she said, well, something changed for me, Ed. And I said, well, what was that? And she said, well, every morning I wake up, because she lived in Redwood City, and I drive to South San Francisco where I work, and at night I drive back to Redwood City where I live. And then she got quiet, and I waited for a while, and I waited, and I said, but Maria, what changed? Oh my God, she said, everything has changed. You see, now when I wake up in the morning, I drive to South San Francisco where I live. But at the end of the day now, I get in my car and I drive home. And driving home is so different than driving back to where I live. And if we can get people to believe they're driving home, we've done a lot.
I'd love to hear a story from you, Lou. It's like, I'd love to hear one of your stories in terms of how you relate to that.
So I just had a very interesting conversation just 45 minutes ago with a fellow, I won't call him out, but he got here a little late to the boot camp. And everybody was asking him, how's it been? How's it been? How's it been? And he just got here. And I said, well, isn't that interesting that everybody wants to know, how's it been? You just got here. And yet there's this incredible reaching out to find out, you know, how was the day? What did you learn? And you can go to a lot of conferences and get to this point in the clock, and nobody's going to ask you, how's it been? So I just, that little story sticks with me from today.
Craig, this is, do you want to give him the mic?
He keeps giving it back.
He keeps giving it back. I want to hear more about what you'd like to see community building look like for this community of people.
I'm not sure, because my specialty is to help people connect and then to get out of the way. Getting out of the way is a very underestimated organizational skill. And for those of you who follow my sense of humor, you may realize that when I'm often when I'm saying something, you can't tell if I'm making a joke or being serious. The answer being yes. The idea, though, is one thing is to reinforce, again, the work of others and to bring that out in social media. That's my focus right there. Again, focusing mostly on Twitter and Facebook. So that's the bit of community building, strictly from the bottom up, that I recommend and I hope people will be doing. I mean, I'm contemplating already a short blog post, which I'll cross-post, which will basically be quoting people or referring to people, what people said, including myself at this conference, because you never know what people will blurt out, which will often be the most effective stuff. So that may include some self-parody, because I'm already viewing or visualizing a blog post saying, you know, crap Craig said, which will mostly just be a Twitter search involving the hashtag CLFBC, you know, Craigslist Foundation Bootcamp, and then names like maybe Craig or otherwise. The deal is that people here, you're getting stuff done and saying stuff which matters, and then the challenge is how do you communicate it to a broader audience? From my point of view, of course, it's with jokes, but I just can't help myself. I'll try to stop. I'd like to give the microphone away again now.
And get out of the way.
It's my job. I'll hold the microphone.
Well, Chris, you're holding the mic too, and I guess I want to ask, you're from Denver. Is it community building the same everywhere you go? Same in Colorado, same in the Bay Area? Anything that we in particular should keep in mind as we go about our business of, you know, our mission of community building right here?
In my previous job, I ran an organization called the National Civic League, which is the nation's oldest good government organization. And so I spent 20 years traveling the country and spending time helping communities of all sizes solve problems. And one of the things that you learn very quickly when you do that is that every community is convinced, rightly so, that they have a unique culture and a unique set of social and civic norms that you have to understand to be able to do work there. But I think it's also important to understand that there are some universal truths around community organizing and community problem solving that are absolutely consistent all over the country, and that it's so much of what we talked about here today, that there's a need to listen to people in ways. I think the biggest frustration that I heard when I was traveling the country on a regular basis and spending time in communities is that people didn't feel like they were heard. And again, I think it's important to make the distinction that in modern American life, that there's no shortage of places where people can go to speak their mind, but there's absolutely a shortage of places where people can go to feel like they were heard. And so we've got communities full of people who are sort of shouting into the wind and talking about the concerns they have, and they get on listservs and they get on blogs and they call talk radio and they write letters to the editor, but in the end they don't feel like anybody really processes it and hears them. And I think that one of the common challenges across communities all over the country right now is finding ways to reinvent the way we have conversations with each other, to give people a sense of personal efficacy, that they really were heard and that somebody understood them.
We don't have to do it Fox News style?
No,
You're a liar.
definitely not. Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Lucy, I wanted to ask you about, because your own recent professional history has demonstrated that you can make the transition from doing work that pays to work that matters and still pays. And I had about 10 conversations with people in this room that are struggling with that. How do I feed my soul and feed myself at the same time? Your advice.
It's kind of you to say that I figured it out. It doesn't feel that way, but Amy's referring to the fact that I just sold a company and am moving into a role over time, not right away, but over time, that will allow me to focus on writing, which is what I really love to do. And I think the hardest part of that is actually, for me, was figuring out what that thing was and realizing that a life spent not doing it wasn't going to really be the life I wanted to live. And so once that becomes really central, once I knew what it was I really wanted to focus on, it became a process of figuring out how to put that at the center and make it support me, not working to support it. I'm a nerd, a proud one. I actually usually use the other four-letter word, which is a wonk. So I did a lot of research about what I wanted to do. I spent a lot of time talking to people. I try to talk to everyone here about what I'm trying to do. And then it's a matter of figuring out what those latter steps are. I have been so inspired by people I've met here today who had a vision, had an idea, have sacrificed all kinds of things to make that real. And I want you to just sort of go back and recognize how important that spark of what you're trying to do is to making it happen. It may not work out that the structure you've got is the right one, but if you're clear on what it is you're meant to do, then you can put that at the center and make the other things pay off, hopefully. Amy's giving me more credit than is due me at this point.
Am I? I thought you said you got a fellowship to support your writing of the book. That'll be your thing. Isn't that a good solution? How did you do it, Ed? How did you do it? Because you were working in government, and now you're an entrepreneur doing great things.
No, it was interesting. I was lucky. I fell into it. I mean, I think you have to just, I'm not a big one about planning too much, And I was a Vista volunteer.
That must have been difficult as a city manager.
No, this was before I was a city manager. But I think city managers way overplan too. You can't plan a lot of stuff. But I was a Vista volunteer in Philadelphia. This was way back in the 60s. And I couldn't believe how poorly Philadelphia was run. And I said, any idiot can run a city better than this. And I ought to be one of those idiots. And so, but in those days, back in the 60s, working for government was actually somewhat honored. I mean, Kennedy did make it an okay thing to do. So I had this ability to spend my life work making very small differences, but making differences to people. And I was getting paid to do it. And I loved it. And so, yes, exactly as you said, it filled my heart, it fed my spirit, and it made me feel alive. So, I mean, I had to tell myself, I was still having fun, but I ought to stop doing this because there's something more I should do. I just think if you're passionate about something, just damn don't worry about anything else. And if you're not passionate about it, get off and get passionate about something.
Nice. Is that right, Craig? Is that how you did it?
For me, it was, luck in a big way. In '95, having seen people give back to others on the net, I figured I should do so, and just started something and then listened and did more, and then listened and did more beyond that. Now I'm trying to figure it out for this Craig Connects thing, and that's something being worked on right now, pretty literally speaking. So that was just one unique stumbling course. I do want to emphasize there was nothing and is nothing altruistic about it. I'm just doing what feels right, and altruism is too fancy a word for my taste about it. Partially this reflects my abnormal social affect as a nerd, and that's not a joke at all. But the deal is I stumbled onto something and just am following through. I'm still doing customer service. Right now my team doesn't need me anymore, so it's not very deep. You know, I've done all the skills and knowledge transfer I can do. The idea is that I'll just keep stumbling along. Now I'm extending it into my own vision of public service and philanthropy, and I'll just keep doing that, and I'll be calling on everyone for help in that. By everyone, over a 20-year period, I intend to mean literally everyone, just basically the whole planet. Did I digress there? Here, I'll give it to...
Can I just say something about the broader issue? So I'm an economist by academic training, and in the field of economics, they talk about this concept called psychic income, which is something that is almost monetizable, and it's something that people are paying more and more attention to. Young people certainly are having very deep conversations about what it means to be a complete human being, what it means to be a complete person. And the concept of psychic income is that there are certain things that you can do or say that bring value to you that is just short of a check that you can deposit in your bank account. But when you go to a neighborhood picnic and you see your neighbors for the first time in a few months, and they say, geez, we haven't seen you forever. Where have you been? You haven't been around. And if your answer back is, I got to tell you, I made a pretty big life-changing decision. I decided to become a big brother, and it's changed me, and it's made a huge impact on my life. Literally, what comes back to you at that moment is almost something that you can deposit in the bank. People hold you at higher esteem. Your shoulders square back in a way that they didn't square back before. And I think that people are recognizing that there are different kinds of income. There's money that you can make, but then there's this notion of feeling complete and feeling like you're giving back and feeling like you're making a difference. And I think that more and more in this country, people are looking for opportunities where they can feel like they're making a difference.
Psychic paychecks.
Psychic income, yeah. Psychic paycheck.
I was thinking psychic paper because I watch Doctor Who. I'm not a nerd, but I watch Doctor Who from a very cool point of view. So we're going to leave. We're almost done. But this room of people are connected and are part of a community. Each person sitting here represents literally thousands and thousands of other people who want to see the community better and want to see the country better. So how do we hold on till the next Craigslist boot camp? I just want to quickly hear, what is it that you do that keeps you positive and working and focused and energetic? And what can you send this group away with that will keep them going?
As for me, what seems to matter is seeing that you actually have some results, some effect, and that, frankly, sometimes that people notice it. So maybe do some of that for each other. The deal is that when you see someone you've met here maybe make some progress or issue a call for the action themselves, something you can do at least is retweet it, or on the Facebook side, do a like or share. Just affirm what each other is doing, and maybe that matters. Sometimes that's the best that you can do during the day, and I can only speak for myself, but that really does matter at times.
In the Pitchathon session, there was a young man who spoke about celebrating the mission. And he's built an organization that's building a marketplace, that's helping people in the mission create jobs, share their wares, share their information, share their wisdom, and celebrate each other. And it seems to be working on a single city block in San Francisco, but the idea is absolutely contagious. To celebrate that one-to-one connection, that neighbor-to-neighbor, that block, it'll spread through the mission, it'll spread through the city, it'll spread to Oakland, it'll spread. Celebrate it.
I guess I would take a slightly different tack in the sense that I think you all are working on really powerful, I've heard you, things, but for me, it's getting absolutely away from that. And each of you know where you recharge, and you've got to know that, and you've got to recharge. For me, it's going up into the high mountains and hanging out with Mother Nature. I just think you've got to get away from work to recharge, because then you come back even more powerful.
Nice.
I guess the thing that keeps me sane and moving forward is the recognition that Washington, D.C. is the least American city in America, and that what happens there is I think more days than not the equivalent of sort of kabuki theater, and that you can sort of watch it and be entertained by it, but the real America exists in Oakland and San Francisco and Denver and Redwood City, and that's where America really exists, and I think that's what we have to focus on.
Nice. Can you indulge me to give you one little piece of advice? You know, often when we we commit our lives to improving others' lives, we forget about ourselves. And so one thing that's kept me going are those people in my network, not social network, but like the real, my friends, people who care about me, taking me out to coffee or meeting me for lunch or doing nice things. I just encourage you to take care of each other, because really when it comes down to it, the community is not just networking on some project that you're going to write a grant on. It's about, I know your kids, or we live down the street, or we can connect on a human level. Let's go walk our dogs together. And that is a part of this community building, even among the people in the room, that I want to encourage you to value and to continue. Try to build real relationships with the people in this room, and then through that, we'll get a lot done. And I want to thank you for having me and for graciously being in the audience and participating today. And I want to thank our panelists, Craig and Lucy and Chris and Ed, for sharing their insight and expertise. Let's give them a round of applause.